Thanks, Cahill, and I want to welcome Mr. Murphy to the committee, and just want to raise some questions, mainly because I'm a Dublin deputy. I'm mainly concerned about the Dublin bus services and the impact that any changes might have on those services, and bearing in mind that last week, as the chairman said, we had SIP2 and the NBRU here, and they raised their concerns. Now, it has been pointed out that back in 2009, Delight carried out a study of the Dublin bus and bus air services, and they came to the conclusion that they were offering value for money. They also made the point that the subvention that both of them were receiving in 2009 was way below the subvention being paid in comparable countries. And since then, in fact, the subvention has been lowered again and again, so that it's also been pointed out that there are performance targets which have been set for Bus Air and Dublin Bus, and that they have met those targets. In some cases, they've actually exceeded the targets. So that raises the question as to what is the rationale for now offering out 10% of those services to open competition, and why the figure of 10% was selected. Why wasn't it 5%, or why wasn't it 15%? What is that? On what basis was that decision arrived at? Reference has been made to the transfer of undertakings legislation, and it was pointed out to us last week that there is grave concern that the fact that pensions rights are excluded from that legislation, and that would be a factor, that is a factor that weighs heavily on the existing employees, and it could be a reason as to why they might wish not to transfer if their services were to be handed over. And I think that's a very important consideration, particularly for all workers, particularly perhaps for older workers. Now, the question was raised, the Senator Mooney referred to the experience in the UK, and I mean that is something that's borne in mind, because post-regular deregulation in the UK did not work out. In fact, less people were using bus services after deregulation than there was before. There's also the question of the subvention. I mean, the level of subvention to the new operators, I assume, would continue. They would continue to receive a subvention. So we're not, what gain would there be if you're just subsidising somebody else to provide the same service? You also made the point, which was very clear, that there should be no discernible effect if the services did change, if the operator of the services was changed, that it should be done seamlessly, and that there should be no change. Now, I would point to the example of Aircoach, who are providing bus services from Dublin Airport around the city. I think they're now called First Bus, which is one of the largest bus operators in the UK. They've now come into the Irish market. But they do not provide wheelchair accessible facilities on their buses, despite the fact that it has been raised with them. In fact, if a customer in Dublin Airport approaches with a wheelchair, approaches Aircoach or First Bus, they're told, "Oh, you go to Dublin Bus, we're not carrying you." So that's not a level playing field, I think. I mean, it's also been pointed out that the amount of space on a bus provided for a wheelchair passenger takes up about 3 times the space of other able-bodied passengers, and the operator is carrying a bit of a loss, And the fact that Aircoach are not doing that, I think, is a matter of concern. And it would raise concerns that if other operators could point out that, well, at least Aircoach are not doing it, why should we? So I think that is an important consideration. And I don't represent Waterford, but it has been pointed out to us last week as well that all of the bus air services, passenger services from Waterford were going out to tender. Okay, you've referred to the school bus and the other services, but and that was a concern as well, because of the impact that might have on the people who provide the services at the moment. That's all, Chairman. Yeah.
Okay, Mr. Murphy.
Deputy Kenny, let me pick up the issue of the Deloitte report and subvention and performance targets firstly. Yes, there was a report, 2009 Deloitte report. It wasn't done for this authority, and in general it had a number of statements saying that Dublin Bus and Bus Air were comparable with their peers. Okay, so one could take comfort from that it seemed to say that they were very efficient. However, I think a careful reading of the report gives a slightly different picture. For example, in Dublin Bus, they do a case study of the Finglas corridor. They identify 17% cost savings that could be made on that corridor, and they say those could be replicated all across 13 other corridors in the city. In regards to Bus Éireann, they also say that Bus Éireann should subcontract and tender out some of their services because smaller operators will be able to perhaps provide them at a cheaper price. So the Deloitte report has issues in it as regards their efficiency. On the subvention side, in general, subvention in Europe ranges between 30% to 60%, 60 or 70% maybe in some cities. However, it is not as low as perceived in Ireland. It is probably for Dublin Bus Éireann, it comes to about 50% of their revenues. They're about the mean area because subvention, there's the base subvention, there's actually the free travel scheme, which is supported by the Department of Social Protection. There's actually tax foregone in the tax saver where the revenue is supporting public transport. And you put all those together, you end up with a subvention in around 50%. I'm not saying that it is the highest subvention in Europe, but it is not the lowest. It's around the mid-range. You mentioned about the air coach and wheelchair accessible fleet. Air coach run a commercial service, and currently in Ireland there's no requirement on licensed commercial services to have wheelchair accessible fleet. For example, Bus Éireann on their commercial services do not have full wheelchair accessible fleet. The state, however, has invested in Dublin Bus and has bought the buses so that they're all wheelchair accessible. And I can guarantee you that all the services that we provide through these new competitive tenders will be wheelchair accessible fleet, fully 100% wheelchair accessible. You mentioned about the experience in the UK, but as I was saying to Senator Moon, and you're quite right, outside London there has been a drop in bus services. And what happened was that there might have been a splurge of growth in commercial bus service outside London. What happened was then they diminished, and then the state went in and did subsidised services. So that's not a model that I would recommend. However, within London, there's been a massive growth in public transport. It is as high now as it was back in 1962, which is a great age of public transport before the growth of the car. And they continue growth in ridership and continued satisfaction there in London. Regarding TUP, I've mentioned before, yes, it's a matter that we will address. We will talk to the unions. We'll be talking to also the companies as well, and we will see what can be done with regards to that regarding the tender competition. And you mentioned why 10%, why not 5%? Well, in constructing competitive tendering, with any tender competition, one of the key to realising value for money is actually to have real competition, to have a significant number of people who would bid for the services. We did a market consultation in 2012, I think it was, a market consultation 2012 with both international and Irish operators. And in around the 80 buses in the Dublin region would draw in both the big Irish operators and would draw in international operators to compete. So it would enlarge the pool. If you make the number of buses too small, the pool will go small for operators coming in. Also, the 80 buses may allow us to parcel a north and south tender competition, which we're looking at, and also may allow us to run that concurrently with the commuter services from Bus Éireann in, to create a significant sized market that people could bid for in lots coming from abroad. And to be honest, throughout Europe, there have been, in all the cities and the jurisdictions that have realised value, there have been major operators that have come in who have delivered the value. So there are big global operators come in and do deliver the value through competition. They leverage off their management resources, they leverage off their existing structured systems, all to the benefit of the contracting authority, which can avail of that and pass on then the benefits to the consumer. And on the service side, I can guarantee the service will be exactly the same. There'll be no discernible difference. What it may do is and we would hope that it will realise some cost savings for us to improve services and to increase services, because the money is going to be put back in, the savings are going to be put back into the public transport system, whether it is in Dublin or whether it is in rural areas which have big gaps in services. And so every penny that we can realise in savings will be put back into better services.